Sound the bells.
This is adopted from a prayer that Pope Benedict prayed at Ground Zero in 2008. O God of love, compassion, and healing, look on us, people of many different faiths and traditions, who gather this day, and remember that day of incredible violence and pain. We ask you in your goodness to give eternal light and peace to all who died that day, the heroic first responders, our firefighters, police officers, emergency service personnel, and the Port Authority personnel, along with all the innocent men and women who were victims of this tragedy, simply because their work or service brought them there on that day. We ask you in your compassion to bring healing to those who, because of their presence here that day, suffer from injuries and illness. Heal too the pain of still grieving families and those who lost loved ones in this tragedy. Give them the strength to continue their lives with courage and hope. We're mindful as well of those who suffered injury, death, and loss on the same day at the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania. Our hearts are one with theirs as our prayer embraces their suffering and pain. God of peace, bring your peace to this violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of the world. Turn your way to love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. God of understanding, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this tragedy, we seek your light and your guidance as we confront these terrible events. Grant that those whose lives were spared may live so that their lives lost here may not have been lost in vain. Comfort and strengthen us. Give us hope and give us wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among nations and in the hearts of all. Amen. firefighter's prayer. When I am called to duty, wherever flames may rage, give me strength to save a life, whatever be its age. Help me embrace a little child before it is too late, or save an older person from the horror of that fate. Enable me to be alert and hear the weakest shout, and quickly and efficiently to put the fire out. I want to fill my calling and to give the best in me, to guard my every neighbor and protect his property. According to God's will, I must answer death's call. Bless with your protecting hand my family, one and all. Amen.
Parade rest. Thank you so much, Father Sheridan, for those beautiful prayers. Appreciate you being here with us this morning. I'd like to welcome everybody here. All our firefighters, police officers, EMS workers, on duty, off duty, retired. All our family members. Mayor Regal, all our city officials, our state reps, friends. Mark Silvestri, Veterans Affairs Director, welcome. We're going to have a brief speaking program right now, and I'd like to invite our Honorable Mayor up to start, Brian Arrigo.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. 20 years ago today, an unfathomable tragedy struck our nation. An act of violence so cruel as to stop all Americans in our tracks that morning. 20 years ago, Americans died due to terror, and our neighbors across the country watched. We watched hatred pay a devastating visit to our doorstep. 20 years ago today, 2,977 people died. 343 New York City firefighters, 23 New York City police officers, and 37 Port Authority of New York and New Jersey police officers. They sacrificed their lives during their effort to save those in peril. In the 20 years since, another 200 New York City firefighters have succumbed to residual illnesses arising from their heroism on that day. Today we mourn these losses, including our courageous public servants. They exemplify the highest standard of neighborliness and of goodwill that we could ever hope to achieve. And our entire nation owes their families a tremendous debt. We grieve with those who lost loved ones in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. These names, too, will live on in the hearts and minds of Americans for time immemorial. Our interwoven culture means that these folks had ties nationwide, including right here in Revere. We remember Mary Ann McFarland and her family today. The past 2 decades have seen us rebuild through all of the grief. One World Trade Center, the tallest building in the United States, operates as a global economic hub. And the area around Ground Zero has been thoughtfully redeveloped for a variety of uses. Memorials to that fateful day have sprung up not only in Manhattan, but across the country. But as anything that happened 20 years ago, many young people today have no recollection of that day. And as time marches on, more Americans will only engage in the artifacts of that day, thinking of it as a moment in history, not as an experience that shook many to their core. The phrase "never forget" has been associated with 9/11. For those of us who the memory persists, the passing of time leaves us a responsibility. Responsibility to share our experiences with each generation. But exactly what aspect of that day and its aftermath ought we never forget? The senseless, terrifying violence has impressed lingering trauma upon our nation. But to focus on the most visible aspect of the tragedy would not do justice to the ways that our people persisted. We persisted with hope, compassion, and neighborliness. To allow the gut-wrenching terror to be our most striking memory would not impart coming generations the strength of our rebuilding, the heroism of our first responders, and the courage of our neighbors far and wide. On one of the nation's darkest days, neighbors and strangers risked their lives for one another. In the still of the following weeks, we stood together in solidarity. And in the 20 years since, we have supported our first responders and demonstrated the courage to rebuild and continue the march of progress. Our resiliency will be the most poignant monument to the sacrifices of that fateful day. The most concrete monument to immortalize the service of our first responders are not monuments in concrete. They are policies that support, empower, and keep safe those who are ready to jump into service at a moment's notice. So today, we express our respect for all of you, our first responders, our finest, and we pledge our resolute commitment to always represent and support you. Thank you. Apologize. I will now hand it over to our state representative, Jeff Turco. Before I do that, I do want to acknowledge our counselors and school committee members that have joined us, including our City Council President, Anthony Zambuto, our Counselor at Large, Stephen Morabito, Counselor at Large and Vice President of the City Council, Jerry Visconti, Ward 1 City Councilor, Joan McKenna, Ward 2 City Councilor, Ira Novoselsky, Ward 3 City Councilor, Arthur Guanasso, Ward 5 City Councilor, John Powers, Ward 6 City Councilor, Ricky Serino, School Committee members Anthony D'Ambrosio and Michael Ferranti. With that, and our representative on the Northeast Metro Tech Board, Anthony Caggiano. With that, I will turn it over to Jeff Turco, State Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, brave public safety officers, police, fire, EMS. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I remember as a kid, listening to my parents talk about the seminal moment in their lives. And for some of you older folk, you may remember this, the death of President Kennedy. And people would talk about where they were, who they were with, what happened, the nuns, if you went to Catholic school, coming in sobbing, crying, and how it impacted their lives. And even though as a young kid I wasn't there, I felt like I was there because it was so vivid, the memory that they shared with me and with my siblings. And listening to the mayor talk about the younger generation that didn't experience September 11th, I think we all here have a duty to share those vivid memories with the young of America today. 20 years ago, we were attacked by forces of evil. And they attacked us why? They attacked us because we stand as a beacon of hope and freedom for the world. We stand as a beacon of individual liberty and tolerance for people in the world. And it's something that those people in their ideology don't understand and don't respect. And yet they came here and they did something that they probably didn't anticipate doing. Yes, they knocked down some buildings and killed a lot of people. But what they did was they united a country. They saw, you look on TV and you see the vivid images of the fire trucks going in and the brave firemen and the police going into burning buildings, saving people, carrying people out. You see the image of Father Michael Judge killed in New York City trying to aid people in need, and the firemen carrying his body out of the rubble. You hear the stories of Todd Beamer and the people on the flight in Shanksville saying, let's roll, because they wanted to protect the White House and the Capitol, and they didn't know where they were going to be the next target to. You see people like Pat Tillman, who had a promising career in the NFL, say, my country needs me. And he walked away from a career that would have paid him millions to go serve in the United States Army Rangers, where he was ultimately killed in active duty. You see the recruitment lines around America at that time, where young men and women stood up and said, my country needs me. How powerful an image is it? And so 20 years ago today, we could, be sad with the image of the buildings coming down, but you go and you look, and we've returned triumphantly with the image of World Trade Center 1 now and the beautiful monument that's there, but also the life of service that so many of you have given to our community and to our nation. It's a very powerful moment. But one other image that stays in my mind is, as these forces of hate try to divide us and destroy us, I think back to watching the American national anthem be played in Moscow in Red Square, or in Paris in front of the Arc de Triomphe, or in front of Buckingham Palace, the British Prime Minister coming here to be with the American people in a speech to Congress. How powerful that was and is today. I just want to thank each one of you again, members of the fire service and the police service and EMS, for what you do every day to protect us. And though September 11th is a memory for many, you guys every day put your lives on the line like those roughly 400 police and fire did that sacrificed their lives. You do that every day for us to keep us and our families safe. May St. Florian and may St. Michael the Archangel continue to protect you. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Turco. Before I begin my remarks, I'd just like to send regards from Revere Police Chief David Callahan. David couldn't be with us this morning. He had a COVID exposure and he's awaiting test results. So we send the police chief our best. Again, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this solemn occasion, honoring the 20-year remembrance of the September 11th, 2001 attacks on our country at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. These attacks mark the worst attacks on U.S. soil since December 7th, 1941, and like Pearl Harbor, September 11th, 2001, shall live in infamy in the collective memory of all Americans. We shall never forget. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, began as a beautiful, unseasonably warm and sunny day, much like today. That would soon change as the world watched the horrific images unfold of the terrorist attacks in real time on television. We soon learned that terrorists hijacked 4 commercial jet airplanes with the intent of using them as weapons of destruction against our people by purposely flying them into buildings. We watched the images in disbelief as first the North Tower was attacked, and then shortly thereafter the South Tower was attacked by a second hijacked plane. Intense fires fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel raged inside the World Trade Center as smoke billowed out of the gaping wounds in both towers. Victims inside, below the impact zones, desperately attempted to flee the buildings to safety. As civilians fled the towers, New York City's first responders, the firefighters, police officers, and EMS workers rushed inside the towers to help evacuate trapped victims. The Fire Department of New York City, under the direction of Chief Peter Gansey, set up the command post at the World Trade Center, directing the largest rescue operation in the history of the fire service. Their mission was to rescue, evacuate, and save as many victims as possible from the wreckage of the Twin Towers. Firefighters climbed the stairs, miraculously making it up to the 70th floor impact zone, assisting trapped victims before the unthinkable happened. Both towers of the World Trade Center would fall without warning in a catastrophic collapse, burying Lower Manhattan in a cloud of burning debris, toxic smoke, and dust. The souls we lost that day included Revere's own Mary Ann McFarland. Mary Ann was the daughter of Ann McFarland and niece of retired Revere firefighter Francis Flood. Mary Ann was killed when the plane she was a passenger on, United Flight 175, was hijacked out of Boston and intentionally flown into the South Tower of the World Trade Center that fateful morning. She was 34 years old. Another young local woman with close family ties to the city of Revere was also murdered at the World Trade Center. Her name was Gertrude M. Trudy Allegero. Trudy was the cousin of Revere Fire Captain Michael DiCarlo. She was 37 years old. Immediately following the attacks, 15 Revere firefighters responded to the World Trade Center to offer aid and work at what was becoming known as Ground Zero. Then acting Revere Fire Chief Eugene Doherty led the charge when activated to respond as a member of the FEMA Task Force 1 Urban Search and Rescue Team. Chief Doherty worked the hole at Ground Zero, searching for any signs of life in the weeks following the attacks. The rest of us worked on the pile, joining other firefighters on the bucket brigade, clearing debris from the pile and moving critical equipment and supplies around the World Trade Center site. After the first week, it became clear that there would be no more victims to be saved out of the rubble. The harsh reality set in for the rescue workers that the rescue was now a recovery mission. The goal of the recovery mission was to recover and identify as many human remains as possible and hopefully provide some comfort and closure to the grieving families of those killed. This recovery went on for the better part of that year. The official death toll from September 11th was 2,977 innocent people murdered. The first responders paid a heavy toll that day. 412 emergency response workers killed, including 343 members of the Fire Department, New York, including Fire Chief Gansey and the FDNY Senior Command Staff, 37 members of the Port Authority Police Department, and 23 members of the NYPD. In the 20 years following the attacks, many more first responders have become stricken and died as a result of the toxins they were exposed to while working at Ground Zero. Sadly, these injuries and deaths have essentially doubled the number of first responder casualties suffered as a result of the September 11th attacks. The most sacred duty of all first responders is to protect life. Countless acts of selflessness and courage by New York City's first responders were recorded and documented to be preserved for all future generations. Every first responder at the World Trade Center knew the gravity of what they faced that day. They knew they may never make it out of there alive. Despite knowing this, they continued to focus on their work without regard for their own personal safety. They put themselves in harm's way to perform their sworn duty to protect life. Many thousands of lives were saved September 11th due to the selfless acts of bravery performed by the New York City first responders, as well as many ordinary New Yorkers. As we say in the fire service, these were just ordinary people performing extraordinary acts. We are forever grateful for their service, and in closing, just like to renew our promise to honor the sacrifices of all those lost on 9/11 and their families. We shall never forget. This concludes our ceremony. Please feel free to come inside the fire station. We have assembled a September 11th display for everyone to take a look at. Thank you all for being here. Have a good day. Detail dismissed.
Good, Chief. Thank you. Very nice.